Lee is nearing shore in the Maritimes as a post-tropical storm. Power has been knocked out to nearly 170,000 customers in the region. Good afternoon, I'm Todd Battis. This is a special edition of CTV News, and we welcome viewers joining us across the country on CTV News Channel. Lee is hammering the East Coast with high winds, heavy rain, and massive waves. Let's bring in CTV meteorologist Kalen Mitchell, who's been tracking its progress. Kalen, give us an update of where things stand.
Well, one thing I want to tackle right off the bat is that post-tropical transition. We've talked about this at length, but that is just a change in the physics and structure of the storm, not necessarily a lowering of the intensity of the weather with it or the impacts expected. In fact, the current sustained winds analyzed around the center of Lee are still equivalent to a Category 1 hurricane. It has slowed its forward movement. Earlier, it was moving towards the north at near 40 kilometers per hour. That forward movement now down to around 35 kilometers per hour. Its movement was forecast to slow as it moved into and across the Maritimes. And unfortunately for us, that means this one is going to be a bit of a grind to get through. Here's the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. In this update, which came out just a few minutes ago, a slight shift to the west for Lee. Earlier, it looked like the landfall point might be closer towards the border of Shelburne and Yarmouth. Now it's more firmly back towards Yarmouth County. That landfall could happen anytime over the next couple of hours. It's a little hard to estimate that landfall time because the center of Lee has become distorted and a little bit larger. It is then expected to continue to track over the Bay of Fundy and eventually into the Gulf of St. Lawrence as a post-tropical storm system. Remember, though, that this weather system is so large at this point in time that the impacts of rain and wind have become much more spread out from that center point. There's a number of areas that have experienced tropical storm force winds already today in areas of the Maritimes, most widespread around the Atlantic coastline of Nova Scotia and into the southwest of the province, but also for coastal Charlotte County in New Brunswick. A tropical storm force wind is a 1-minute sustained wind of 63 kilometers per hour or higher and would certainly be accompanied by stronger gusts. And we have had those stronger gusts today. Taking a look at some of the peak reported gusts so far, it does include one at Halifax International Airport at 117 kilometers per hour, just over 100 kilometers per hour, Backrow Point and Briar Island. There's a personal weather station on Grand Manan, so this one is unofficial, that has reported some peak wind gusts today between 130 and 150 kilometers per hour. Those would be hurricane force gusts. Here's where we stand with winds currently as we're making our way just past the noon hour around the Maritime region. A lot of them being sustained between 30 and 60 kilometers per hour, but still higher on parts of the Atlantic coastline of Nova Scotia. At this hour, sustained wind near 81 kilometers per hour being reported at a weather station at Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. The peak wind gusts there at 106. Halifax International Airport right now reporting a peak wind gust near 96 kilometers per hour. Areas in the south of New Brunswick, including St. John and the Bay of Fundy coastline, have peaked between 80 and 85. A hurricane watch remains in effect for coastal Charlotte County and New Brunswick, the Tri-County region in Nova Scotia, extending up the south shore and into Halifax County. Exposed areas of the coast could still get some gusts near 120. Much of the rest of the Maritimes remains underneath a tropical storm warning. Peak wind gusts between 60 and 90 kilometers per hour are expected as we move through this afternoon and into this evening. A storm surge warning still in effect around the Atlantic coastline of Nova Scotia. We had a period of high tides mid to late morning. We are now getting past that period of high tides. However, there is a second period of high tides coming up later this evening, mostly between 9 and 11 p.m. It does look like it might be parts of the eastern shore that might be experiencing some of the higher waves at that point in time. Todd.
And this storm came in a little slower. Initially, we were expecting it to make landfall right about now, and I'm wondering if it's behaving as you would have expected it.
Yeah, about that. There has been a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of change, I should say, with both the forward speed of the storm. At times, it actually was speeding up and coming in faster than what was being predicted, and then a little bit of a slowdown here on the latest update. Also, there's been a little bit of shifting west to east with the track, but in neither case, when it comes to the speed of the storm or the position of the track, is it altering the impacts that we were expecting here in the Maritimes by a significant margin.
Okay, thank you, Kalen. We'll check in with you a little later, of course. Now, we have reporters and camera crews fanned out across the Maritimes covering the impact. Southwestern Nova Scotia, as you just heard from Kalen, seems to be one of the hardest hit areas at this point. Take a look. This is video that was shot at Hawk Beach. That's in the Barrington area, and it shows, well, it shows the highway basically impassable. You can see it there. Basically, it's buried by rocks and debris. The waves continue to pound that part of the coast. The beach itself appears to be extensively damaged. Also, we know the Bay of Fundy and the coastline there is expected to be hard hit. There have been strong winds and heavy rain now for hours. And our Nick Moore is in St. Andrews by the Sea, that tourist community on the coastline. And Nick, I'm sure people are pretty anxious to see what the high tide will bring.
Yeah, hi there, Todd. The high tide here will be at 1:40 p.m. And just so, St. Andrews Harbor behind me, this is past Macquarie Bay, and then you take about 30 clicks and you're out to the Bay of Fundy. We're not seeing any storm surge activity right now, and not even any torrential rain. But between the hours of, between about 10 o'clock and 11:30, we did see quite a number of periods of gusty winds. And people around here were told that if they needed to get anything done today, that their best bet would be early Saturday morning. There were a couple of shops that were open this morning, but I checked my clock at 10:09. The power went out here in St. Andrews. We spoke to a couple people who were out and about earlier today.
Feed everybody because we figured power outages would happen outside of town early.
There was 2 tables waiting for food, but it was already on the grill, so it was good, and they were all happy when they left.
It's been flickering since probably 7:30 this morning, on and off, and I know other people like Bocabec and St. George lost their power about an hour before we did here just now, so we were expecting it.
So power outages, of course, were widely expected quite early. We can hear some generators humming right now. NB Power said they have about 300 power crews out on standby right now along the coast, but also in the area between Moncton and Bucktouche. So again, the high tide here at 1:40 p.m. Many people interested to see what will happen there, but so far it looks like things are going as well as can be expected.
As well as can be expected. Thank you, Nick Moore. We'll check back in with you a little later. St. Andrews by the Sea. Sarah Plowman has been out for hours checking on the conditions near Digby on the other side of the Bay of Fundy, and that's where she is right now. Sarah, what do you see?
Hi, Todd. Good afternoon. Right now, we're really dealing with sustained wind, sustained rain. It's been like this for several hours. Every once in a while, there'll be a big gust of wind, not enough to knock you over, but still enough to sort of surprise you. And it's been like that for several hours. Here in Digby, the power is still on. And earlier this morning, gas stations were still open. Earlier, though, the power is not on in some places, pockets around here, including places along Digby Neck. And earlier we went to an area called Culloden Wharf where people were watching the waves come in. And while they were quite large waves, locals tell me that it wasn't anything significant for them. One even called it calm, but when I was looking at it, it seemed quite large. But we haven't seen any major storm surge here. You know, the boats in the harbor are still secure, which is good because fishermen, this is their livelihood. Their boats are so important to them, and they've been spending hours for the last several days protecting them, tying them with extra lines. So right now, so far, so good for the town of Digby. But like I said, there are places around Digby right now that have lost power. There are power crews here. There are arborists here. Of course, the wind has to die down before anybody could get up in a bucket. Of course, also ferry crossings between here and St. John are canceled. So there are some cancellations, but mostly people are still out and about, not as busy maybe as it normally would be on a Saturday. The mayor told me to advise people to stay home, check on their neighbors, you know, stay safe during this, Todd.
Sarah Plowman in Digby, and you mentioned that the ferry crossing to St. John has been canceled. St. John is reporting that there are trees down and at least one road closure due to some flooding. CTV's Avery McRae is in the port city with us now on the waterfront with the latest. Avery, what are you experiencing there?
Well, right now, Todd, it's nothing too crazy. The rain is coming down, not too heavy. About a half hour ago, we had a little bit of a break, but the nice news is the wind isn't too bad right now. You can see right here over the St. John Harbor, the waves and the boats, nothing shaking all too much, which we like to see because we know it's going to get very busy later. But speaking of those winds, they were bad earlier. You talked about those fallen trees. A couple of maybe 100-year-old trees falling down in King Square earlier this morning. There's been trees falling down on the west side of town that we've seen. About 300 customers currently without power on the west side. That was about 20 minutes ago, so of course things are subject to change. But right now things aren't too bad, but they are going to pick up. The rain is expected to continue, and there's already some flooding. McAllister Drive is closed already. That road floods in normal rainstorms, so this is no surprise to St. John residents. There's even reports of some businesses in that area having some water come up through the drains with all that water. So the east side of town, definitely a place to worry about today. Todd?
All right, the east side, St. John, and we'll keep an eye on that. We'll get back to you, Ava McCurry, in St. John in a little bit. Thank you. One of the first places to feel the storm's impact was Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And that's where CTV Atlantic Bureau Chief Creason Adjkate is right now. And you've been sussing out things in Yarmouth. What's it like?
Hey, Todd. It started raining last night at around 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and it's been going steady all night and into the morning here. So the saturation levels are high. The water tables here are going up. We're driving around up and down the streets here. The ditches are filling up with water. So most likely when, post-tropical storm Lee gets closer here around 4 or 5, when conditions start to deteriorate more, we are going to see a lot of flash flooding. Some roads probably fill up with water. There's been some shops that have been still open around downtown. People getting in their last-minute shopping. There was even a gym. Some people working out in the gym. Some guy was walking their dog down the street. The wind gusts have been picking up. They've been up and down. It'd be calm for a second, and then it'd be really strong. Just before you came to us, a wind gust came in and kind of pushed me over for a little bit, kind of surprised us for a second here. This right here where we are is right near the ferry to Maine. So the water has been kind of up and down, a little bit choppy, and then it would kind of slow down a bit. Of course, the rain is coming down. There is some trees that have already fallen down. We were just up one on, I believe it's Forest Street, up the ferry road there on Forest Street. There's a big tree that came down and is pulling on the line. We were driving around here, and there is some trees that are over top of the power lines. So there is risk of power outages. There is already some reports of some houses experiencing some power outages. Todd.
Okay, and Yarmouth got off easy really last time during Hurricane Fiona, so it looks like they're getting a little more impact a year later. Thank you very much, Creason Adjkate, in Yarmouth for us. Those outer bands of wind have been pushing hard all day, and of course that makes wave action as the Atlantic coastline is being pummeled by heavy waves. There is a report of waves hitting 36 feet. That's at LaHave Bank near Lunenburg. The buoy at the entrance of Halifax Harbor recorded a 28-foot wave. That's not far from Eastern Passage, and that's where we find CTV's Hafsa Arif right now. And the wind blowing a gale there. Hafsa, tell us about what you're seeing.
Well, it's extremely windy. It's really hard to just stand still. The wind is just constantly blowing at me. There are lots of people around the area just kind of observing the waves. Extremely dangerous. There's caution tapes around the road down there. Just letting people know to stay away as much as possible. There has been some rain, but that's also come to a stop. It's been steady. At times you'll feel the waves actually hit you all the way from here. The salt water just like attacking your face. Todd?
Hafsa, we can see the waves crashing there. We know there's a coastal road along that area that leads to housing developments. A lot of people living in that part of what is sort of an extension of Halifax, Eastern Passage. Tell us about the condition of that road, because sometimes rocks get blown up on that.
So I'm not sure if you can see, but the waves are hitting the rocks, and the rocks have kind of fallen all over the road, which is why there are caution tapes letting people know not to cross through. Of course, that hasn't stopped people from going there, taking pictures, videos. Police are on the other side of the road, making sure that people aren't passing through. but there are rocks just scattered all over. Debris is just flying everywhere. It's just a very dirty spot to be at right now, for sure.
Certainly windy. We can see that blowing there. Hafsa, talk about the difficulty of just getting around. You know, people are encouraged to stay inside. We know that's not always the case, but what's it like when you were driving, say, from downtown Halifax out towards Eastern Passage?
You know, traffic was slow, it was steady. However, as we got closer to the waves, families were out there. Of course, they were really eager to see the waves, take pictures of them. No one passed the caution line. They tried not to, but people did try to get as close to the water as much as they could. Right now, power in this area is fine. It's more so the Halifax area that's seeing a lot of power outages right now.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that update. Hafsa Arif in Eastern Passage, Nova Scotia. Let's go back to St. John now. We know that erosion is always an issue in some parts of the city. There's low-lying areas. CTV's Heather Butts joins us. Well, you're on the beach, Heather, aren't you? Tell us exactly where you are.
Todd, we're actually just at the Irving Nature Park, so just down the road really from the harbor. We were there earlier this morning as this storm, the outer band, started to make its way into town. Driving out towards the coast, you're seeing the typical debris, a lot of branches and leaves and so forth over the roadways. A couple of low-lying areas already starting to see that pooling of the water that, you know, St. John, of course, is known, notorious for flooding in low-lying areas. Here out on the beach, it's been a really interesting morning. The waves getting bigger and bigger, as you can imagine, here along the Bay of Fundy. It's been a really incredible morning to be out here. St. John saw gusts up to 85 kilometers per hour this morning. And let me tell you, I could feel those wind gusts as we were out here doing our live hits all morning. So certainly very windy. We've had rain incredibly heavy at times, some real downpours, and at times the rain coming sideways. We're in a bit of a lull at the moment right now, maybe perhaps between those bands where the rain is just a light rain right now and actually a light wind. So conditions here right now not too bad, but of course we know that St. John is expected to have that really heavy rainfall between sort of the noon to 7 o'clock hours. So we'll certainly be anticipating a bit of flooding conditions and power outages, Todd.
Heather Butts on the beach in St. John at the Irving Nature Wildlife area. Thank you very much for that, Heather. It's not surprising to hear that things have let up a bit. We know that is a feature of big storms like this, that you get these bands of wind and rain. We want to go now to CTV's Jonathan McGuinness. He's in southwest Nova Scotia, an area that's getting absolutely pummeled. John, tell us what you're seeing where you are.
Well, Todd, I'm in Barrington Passage right now. The wind and the rain really kicked up here last night. The rain has died down, but as you can see, it's extremely windy. Now, I live on Campbell Island, not too far from here, just across the causeway. Now, as you can see, that little piece of land there behind me, there's a strip of land that connects that to Northeast Point. She says it's rare for waves to breach that strip of land. That was happening with every wave that came in this morning, and that has caused some concern for her for future storms, particularly nor'easters that roll into the area.
John, thank you very much. We've got some breakup there in our connection, which is not surprising given the conditions that you're seeing there that Jonathan McGuinness is in the middle of now in Barrington in southwestern Nova Scotia. There are a lot of Maritimers, of course, without electricity right now. CTV's Heidi Petracek joins us in studio. She's at our touch screen where we can delve into those power outages a little more in depth. Heidi?
Yes, and you can see from what Jonathan was experiencing there, the reason for it, high winds. And I'm going to start with Nova Scotia because that's where the bulk of the outages are right now. In Nova Scotia, there are approaching 170,000 power customers without electricity right now. So this is what the provincial map looks like from Nova Scotia Power. If we drill into the Halifax area, you can see as we expand, these orange blocks will start appearing, and those orange blocks are actually large areas of power outages. So orange blocks actually mean that there are 1,001 to 5,000 customers in that area without power. If you see a red block, that's more than 5,000 customers without power. So those are the kinds of situations we are talking about. We see an orange block here. This is a red block here. So almost 8,000 customers out of power there around Hemlock Ravine Park in the city. So that is a lot of people. And we aren't even in the thick of it yet, from what I understand from Tropical Storm Lee. So that's what things are looking like in Nova Scotia. Southwestern Nova Scotia, there are also power outages there, as Sarah Plowman had mentioned. Maybe not as widespread, but definitely still of people being affected there. If we turn to New Brunswick, there are a lot of power outages centered around Fredericton, 30,000, more than 30,000 now in the Fredericton area, and pockets elsewhere around the region as well. St. John, 3,300. There's also a large outage, 10,000 customers in the area in Woodstock area. And I will turn to PEI. There's not a lot of outages right there right now, obviously because the weather hasn't arrived yet. So 49 customers out in PEI, but we're really talking about a lot of people in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. It's interesting, 30,000 in Fredericton, given the population. If you think there's 3 or 4 people in each home, that reflects a majority of that city. We will check in with you a little later. I also know that you're monitoring social media with video and pictures. We'll get back to you. But right now, we will take a time out, and we will be right back with more coverage. We welcome back viewers in the Maritimes on CTV and those joining us across the country on CTV News Channel. This is continuing coverage of what is now post-tropical storm Lee. We have high winds on the wharf at Port-Tachine Wharf in near Shediac, New Brunswick this morning, and as you can appreciate, it brought a lot of people out to watch the action. Winds intensified in the community just before noon, but the rain is light. Right about now, the seaside community has been hard hit in the past. They're used to these kind of storms. That kind of attitude will show you that. Fiona last September devastated the tourist area. It sustained about $2 million in damages, but there doesn't seem to be reports of any flooding yet. Repairs and extra precautions that were put in place this time seem to be having an impact, and we will certainly be keeping an eye on that.
Well, this is our 3rd storm since we moved out here in 2017, and first time we decided to come down and see what it looked like before the aftermath.
Yeah, I've been here for now 3 years, so Fiona was the first time. I moved from the west, from Manitoba. Fiona was the first time I experienced a hurricane. So I was shocked last year with Fiona and not fully prepared, but this year I got myself fully prepared, even helped newcomers in knowing what to do to get prepared for Lee from my experience with Fiona. So everyone was really helping each other out.
The MLA for the area is asking people to stay home, stay safe, look out for neighbors, especially seniors in the area. Let's go now to Erica Fleck, who is the emergency EMO coordinator for the regional municipality of Halifax. And Erica, let's pick up on what I was just saying there about the folks in Pointe-Tachine and the MLA for the area telling people to stay at home. I take it that's a message you would echo.
Absolutely, Todd. You know, we're seeing some incidents occur, especially along the coastline. It is really unsafe for people to be out there right now, and we're really, you know, urging residents to please be smart and stay home and shelter in place. There's no need to be out right now unless it's an absolute emergency.
It feels like Halifax is bearing more of the brunt of the storm than perhaps we anticipated.
That is true. With the forecast, we did, the wind wasn't supposed to be as high. However, we were ready. We knew that because we've had so many incidents here since May with the fire and then 2 large flooding events, that the ecosystems are weakened, the ground is overly saturated, and it would make trees come down quicker. So, that did come to fruition already, and we haven't seen the peak yet. So we do expect it to get worse, but we did, anticipate this level, but it is still a little surprising with the forecast.
Ms. Flick, we talk about Halifax and we think about the city, but of course the regional municipality is quite large, and it runs from, basically people familiar with Peggy's Cove right up almost, including Sheet Harbor. So there's some rural areas there. What are you hearing from those folks?
So anywhere along the coastline, we're already seeing, large impacts. Roads in Lawrencetown, Eastern Shore are wiped out. Water's already crossed the roads. Roads that were fixed during the fires and flood one, between May and July are out again in the Peggy's Cove area. Issues in Herring Cove, issues in Bedford. Basically anybody near water, we're already seeing those issues. And again, the peak hasn't come yet.
We know that there was heavy damage sustained from that flooding at the end of July, especially in the bedroom community of Bedford, the Sackville River there. Is that a particular area of concern this time?
Always concerned, of course. However, we have not seen any major flooding issues in that area, which is obviously fantastic. But we're still keeping a very close eye on the water levels throughout the entire municipality, but especially that area.
Erica Fleck, Director of Emergency Management for the Halifax Regional Municipality. We thank you for your time. We'll check in with you a little later.
Thank you, Todd.
All right. Let's go back now to southwestern Nova Scotia, Barrington area. That's where CTV's Jonathan McGuinness is now. And John, update us on what's happening there.
Well, Ted, I'm not sure how much of the information got out last time. I understand we had a technical issue there. We're in Barrington Passage right now. This is Barrington Bay behind me. And it's somewhat sheltered here, but as you can see, the wind right now it's pretty strong. I was speaking with a woman earlier, and she says, I'm not sure if you can see the piece of land here behind me. There's a little land bridge that connects that to Northeast Point on Cape Sable Island. And she says it's rare for waves to breach that land. And that was happening with every wave that came in there this morning. And that's causing some concern for her for future storms, particularly nor'easters that come in this direction.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan McGuinness. Still a little break up there, but we'll keep coming back to you because that certainly seems to be the spot of the greatest impact at this point. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with meteorologist Caleb Mitchell. This is CTV's coverage of post-tropical storm Lee. I'm Todd Battis. This storm has been battering the east coast of Canada now for several hours, and it is yet to make landfall. We are fanned out across several areas in the region to bring you the latest in what's going on. And one of those spots is St. John, New Brunswick, where Avery McRae is standing by. Avery, it looks like things have settled down a bit, but we know that the wind has caused some problems, and there's been a lot of rain. Much of that is sitting on roads.
You're not wrong there, Todd. It is McAllister Drive already flooded here, which isn't a surprise to St. John residents, as that road does flood in the regular rainstorms throughout the year. And there's already some reports that, like I mentioned earlier, water coming up through drains of some of the businesses there. And the rain's only supposed to get worse. So the flooding is definitely going to be an issue moving forward. And you talked about the wind as well. The gusts are starting to pick up a little bit since we last chatted 20 minutes ago. The water getting a little bit rougher now, but nothing too crazy as of yet. We talked about it earlier. The gusts were up to 85 kilometers this morning, blowing down some trees. Starting to feel those heavy gusts again now. So expecting a lot more trees to come down. Still, most of the city has power right now. Now, we know that's not going to be the case all day. That is going to change. Have to imagine that happens in the next few hours here as that next wave moves in, picks up the wind a little bit, and a lot more heavy rain, which leads to a lot more fallen trees, power lines, and of course, like you mentioned off the top, lots more flooding on roadways.
All right, Avery McRae, we'll get you to stand by. We'll get back to you a little later. Right now, let's go to the CTV Weather Center. Kaylin Mitchell standing by. This is a massive storm. Virtually the entire Maritimes under some kind of warning.
Yeah, we're talking about the size of the storm, right, Todd? It's a very sprawling weather system when it comes to both the rain and the wind. We do have tropical storm warnings widespread in the Maritime region. Some specific weather warnings as well that we're going to take a look at in a moment. I want to take a look at the rain, though, and go to St. John, where Avery was, and talk a little bit about it, because St. John is one of the areas that is at risk of further heavy rain as we move through the rest of today. You can actually see that off of the Bay of Fundy, there are some higher returns showing up in through the brighter colors. So it'd be sort of intermittent downpours passing through at the moment, but there's a band of some steadier and heavy rain that is set up kind of from the down east area in through Maine and extending up towards McAdam and Fredericton. Remember, the track of the center of this weather system is going to take it through the southwest of Nova Scotia and then over the Bay of Fundy and then near western parts of Prince Edward Island into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. As it makes that movement, right, that band of heavier rain that is currently pushed a little bit further towards the west of New Brunswick is going to have to follow up in behind that center of that weather system. So it is still going to come back into areas of New Brunswick as we move through this afternoon and even into this evening and tonight. Taking a closer look then at that rain, the higher rainfall rates are showing up here through the darker greens and the yellows. You can see some of that passing through Stanley. Fredericton looks like it might be in a little bit of a break right now, but some steadier rain building up towards the Gagetown area. So I'm sure they'll be back into it shortly. And then around the Bay of Fundy coastline, you can see that more rain is coming in on the northern edge of this weather system. As we take a look at our forecast timeline then for rain across the region, that steady heavy rain again represented through the darker greens, the yellows. You will notice that there is going to be a focus for that running in a broad area from the southwest of New Brunswick up towards the north and northeast as we move into Saturday evening and Saturday night. It'll take until the early morning hours of Sunday before that rain slowly begins to diminish west to east across New Brunswick, moving off towards the northeast. But by that point in time, it is that province through a fairly widespread area that could see some rainfall totals running up between 50 and 100 millimeters. Similar totals, by the way, are a risk for some southern areas of Nova Scotia. In fact, I have reports already from in and around the Yarmouth area that they've seen some rain totals of around 80 millimeters. No surprise then that it's that part of the Maritimes that we find our rainfall warnings in effect for. As far as the winds go, for many parts of the region, moving through this afternoon and into Saturday evening, there's going to be widespread gusts, 60 to 90 kilometers per hour. Wind direction will be a little bit variable, remaining north and northeast for the northern half of New Brunswick. Other parts of the Maritimes seeing a more southerly turn in those winds. There will be a diminishment of the winds from the west to east, gradually and slowly, as we move through the overnight, through Sunday morning, through Sunday afternoon, and into the start of next week. Todd.
All right, thank you for that, Kaylin. CTV's coverage of post-tropical storm Lee continues. Welcome back to CTV's coverage of Lee. Nova Scotia Power has had extra power crews ready to go, and they are in the areas that are hardest affected, of course, by this. They started early this morning working because already more than 100,000 customers were without electricity. Efforts to reconnect people will be a challenging task, of course, for the utility. With more on when Nova Scotians might expect to see the power and, well, when they might expect to see crews in their area, because wind is certainly having an impact on where those crews can go. We're joined by Matt Drover, who's Nova Scotia Power's lead on this storm. Matt, always good to see you. Maybe you can give us an update as to where things stand at this hour.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Todd. So we've been preparing all week for the storm. We knew that Lee was going to be a significant storm with really high winds. So we were preparing for all options that could occur. So yesterday, all of our crews from out of Nova Scotia arrived. We put them pretty much everywhere in the province, recognizing that the western part of the province, the South Shore, the Valley, and also HRM would most likely be hit the hardest. So we had the majority of our crews in those areas. Today, they're out there focusing on making sure that the winds are below 80 kilometers an hour so they can get up in the air and make repairs and restore power as quickly as possible.
So that's the benchmark, 80 kilometers an hour. Anything below that, they're able to go up in those buckets to restore?
That's right. And we're seeing lots of gusts that go up above 80 kilometers an hour, and then the gusts will diminish a bit. They'll go below 80, and then our crews will be stationed ready to go, get up, make the repairs, and then get back down to put the power back on. So they are making progress. Sure.
Sorry to cut you off. Look, we've been talking all week. Really, we're just at the end of summer, so the trees are in full bloom still. That must be a challenge. They can act like sails when they get hit with that wind.
Absolutely. All the trees throughout the province still have all the leaves on them. Definitely makes the branches heavier when they come down, makes the impact to the power lines when they fall much more dramatic. But what we are doing is making sure that when it's safe to do so, to get those trees off the line and get the power back on.
Okay. Matt, I know it's too early to talk about restoration, but is there anything you would advise customers at this point?
Absolutely. So the winds are still up above 100 kilometers an hour in some locations, and we expect that to continue through most of the day into tomorrow. So we won't know yet what the impacts are until tomorrow morning. But that's our number one priority beyond safety is once it's safe to do so, to get out and understand the damage. Once we know the damage, we will be updating our restoration times on the map. There's times up there now, but those are really just estimates until we have a better understanding.
Okay. Matt Drover, Nova Scotia Power. We know you're busy. We certainly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
So one of the areas that we know that is getting absolutely pummeled by heavy winds is Eastern Passage, Nova Scotia, not far from downtown Halifax. That's where CTV's Hafsa Arif is right now, and the wind continues to buffet that area where you are, Hafsa.
Yes, it's pretty bad. You know, we've had moments where the wind does calm down, but unlike right now, as you can tell, the wind does pick up, and it's really difficult to just stay in place. So far, power is good in this area, but unfortunately for the Halifax area, it's not looking very good. It's 30,000 people, over 30,000 people don't have power in Halifax. And so far right now, it's looking fine here. People are still going outside. They're still looking at the waves. You'll see behind me, there are cars lined up, and that's because they are just trying to take pictures of the waves. But the wind is just, it's very difficult to stand in. It's very difficult to just even speak. Like, having a thorough thought process throughout this is just very difficult just because of how the wind is picking up and it's hitting you from all directions.
And we know authorities are asking people to stay at home. Thank you very much, Hafsa Arif, for that. We will take a timeout. Our coverage will continue after this. Welcome back. The town of Yarmouth managed to mostly escape Fiona a year ago, but they may not be so lucky this time. We get the latest now from Mayor Pam Mood. Pam, when we spoke last night, you thought that your community was ready for this. Tell me how you're feeling right now, because we know you're getting hit pretty good.
We are getting hit pretty good, Todd, but you know what? I think we called it right last evening. I think Lee has taken, I don't know if a little bit of wind got taken out of his sails, but we're not getting as hard a hit as we originally anticipated. Lots of wind here. There are some trees down, but you know, far better than we thought. We thought we were going to get lambasted here, so
okay, so
that's still not pretty.
Yeah, that's good news. So it may have shifted slightly to the east, because we've heard reporting from Jonathan McGuinness that Barrington seems to be getting it quite badly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just headed down that way on that side, which was a little bit shocking because all the tracks show that it was going to come westward and up around through the Bay of Fundy, but it's heading through Barrington and up Shelburne, Lunenburg, towards Halifax. So, you know, again, I mean, it's not beautiful here. It's windy, you know, but you know, you're capturing the essence. I mean, that's the harbor right there. it's not too bad.
Mayor Pam Mood, thank you very much. We know you're a regional community for people to the east and west of you, really. So I know your thoughts are with folks that are a little further up the road, like in Barrington. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Not far from Yarmouth is Digby, Nova Scotia. Our Sarah Plowman has been out for hours checking the conditions there. She's live. She's at the beach where the rollers are coming in, but the wind doesn't look too bad, Sarah?
Hi, Todd. Yeah, we've moved positions. We are here at a beach, and as you can see, the waves behind me, they are pretty high. Much higher than yesterday, much larger than yesterday, but nothing significant. It's not going to breach the armor stone here or anything like that. The boats at the wharves are still secure, which is good for people. So far, so good here. There are some pockets of power outages, as I mentioned earlier, but nothing significant in the town of Digby. We saw, one larger tree down. We saw some leaves down, some branches, but so far it's okay here. People, though, they're still bracing for maybe what could come. As Mayor Mood mentioned, and you mentioned, this area sort of escaped Fiona's wrath last year. So people are hoping that maybe this time it could be not so bad as well. During Dorian, they did lose power for a number of days. It'll still too early to tell how much power will be lost in this area, but so far, downtown Digby, it's okay.
Okay, and that is certainly good news, Sarah Plowman, in the Digby area. Thank you for that. It's across the province now that we're hearing the worst of it in places like Barrington Passage. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to bring in meteorologist Kaylin Mitchell now. Kaylin, I said that the storm may have shifted to the east. In fact, it's shifted to the west, but that's
right.
Why we're seeing the greatest impacts to the east, because that's where the windiest side tends to be, right?
That's right. The eastern side of these storm systems is the windy side, and the western side is the rainy side. And in the latest update that came in from the National Hurricane Center on the position and track of Lee, there was a little bit of a movement, a little bit further towards the west with it on both its current position as well as the track. And so, of course, Barrington Passage be a little bit more towards the east of that center in those strong winds right now. It's also not uncommon that where the center comes in a little bit closer, which could include the Yarmouth area, that they actually get a little bit of a lull as that happens. We're used to thinking about a lull with a hurricane as it being directly in the eye, and while this weather system no longer has that clear and structured eye, right near the center, the winds do still ease off a bit, because right now they're being driven primarily by the pressure gradient, and it's at its strongest as you kind of move out from the center of the storm. You can also see here on satellite imagery, I just wanted to show that all the moisture now is being pushed off towards the western side. So that's where we're seeing the heaviest of the rain right now, kind of bands back in towards the southwest and New Brunswick, and that rain will continue to add up for that province. Getting reports out of the southwest and Nova Scotia that there were some rainfall totals, 80, 90 millimeters. Just a quick refresher on that track of Lee. So its forward movement has slowed down a little bit. If there's landfall in Yarmouth County, it looks like that'll be over the next hour or two. The center, though, has become quite broad. And once again, Todd, as we've been talking about with this weather system, because it has become so spread out and the rain and the winds are spreading out from the center, those type of changes in the forecast track at this point are not really going to change the weather and the impacts expected around the Maritimes in a very significant manner.
You should expect that you're going to be hit by something almost no matter where you are.
Yeah, there's going to be rain, wind across the entirety of the region from this one.
All right, thank you, Kaylin. That will do it for us at this point. We are going to have live updates throughout the day at ctvnewsatlantic.ca. Kaylin will be updating the forecast, and we will have reporters that will be contributing to that. Please, if you have video or you have pictures, you can send them to us, the care of the website, and we will be presenting those a little later, because we have special live coverage, of course, in CTV News in the Maritimes tonight at 6 o'clock. Also, you can see us on CTV News at CTV News channel nationally if you're watching from elsewhere in the country. If you have family down here, or you just want to keep an eye on a place where you may have summer property, we know a lot of people come down this way in the summer. So we invite you to join us again at 6 o'clock, and then we'll be going throughout the day and into the night as well. Until then, thanks for joining us.